After an agonizing 24-hour delay due to bad weather, Overlord, the most important Allied operation of World War II, is set in motion. Before the Armada embarks for Normandy, the Allies launch one final masterclass of deception. To convince the Germans that Calais is the invasion site, British bombers circle at low altitude, dropping tons of metallic chaff into the air.
This created a huge radar registry for the Germans, and this phantom army that has been constructed in their minds through documents and fake bases, now it starts to come alive.
Totally threw the German defensive planning, it threw it into disarray.
With the misdirection campaign underway, the invasion force heads towards its targets. 5 beachheads and a cliff-top gun emplacement at Pointe du Hoc. Ahead of the transports, an aerial and naval barrage pounds the coastal defenses. Despite the assault, the men on the landing craft come under ferocious German fire.
It was confusing. The German planes were going right over us. There was these bombs and guns were going off and everything else.
Some of the boats, they got hit by bombs already. And all you could see is like, you don't know who they were. See guys laying in the water, some with limbs off and arms. It was more than being frightened on the boats. Some guys were crying a little bit. Some guys was even urinating.
We were all nervous. Everybody was. But there's nothing you could do about it. You knew what you had to do and it had to be done.
Charles Barley and Michael Vernillo are among the first to hit Omaha, the most heavily defended German position.
A lot of guys were in a bunch getting off the boat, and they were killed instantly, you might as well say. When we got into the water was up to my stomach. I said to myself, I said, "Goodbye, Charlie, you're gone." And it was really a terrible feeling in the water. You see the bodies laying around and they couldn't identify them. It was really, really nasty, really bloody.
Those fortunate enough to make it off the boats, the scene they would have confronted is almost unimaginable. They would have been suffering still from seasickness. They would have heard the whirring of bullets above their heads. They would have seen in front of them dead and dying American soldiers. But it was more than chaos. It was deadly chaos.
As the Allies continue to land against merciless German fire, the casualty rate soars. But after 15 hours of fighting, all beachheads are taken, with Pointe du Hoc falling the following day. The Allies suffer 10,000 casualties, but it is blood shed achieving the almost impossible. They have a foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe.
For Hitler, this was the nightmare come to pass.
We basically, signed the death certificate of Nazi Germany on June 6, 1944.
After weeks and weeks of being bottled up in the Normandy beachhead, the breakout that occurred exceeded expectations.
The success is down to the network of supply lines chasing the frontline soldiers. Connecting France with the war depot of Britain are artificial Mulberry harbors, landing 2.5 million men, 4 million tons of supplies, and 500,000 vehicles within the first 10 months. Fueling the offensive is Operation Pluto, 70 miles of undersea pipeline pumping up to 1 million gallons of fuel per day into France.
Those tons and those millions of gallons of fuel were on a scale that probably won't be replicated in the future. So what they accomplished might be unique in human history, really.
From space, the speed of advance is astounding. August 19th, Paris is liberated, followed by Rouen, Verdun, Antwerp, and Brussels. By September, the Allies reach the Siegfried Line on the cusp of the German fatherland. Hitler launches his final desperate counterattack, the Battle of the Bulge. Despite heavy losses, the Allies prevail, and Nazi Germany stands on the abyss.
Hitler's gamble in the Ardennes basically ensures the end of the Reich. This was his last operational force he had where he could try to influence the pace of either front, east or west. Once he threw that force away, the American-Soviet conquering of the Reich in the next year was inevitable.
The war in Europe nears its climax. On the other side of the planet, the drive towards Japan is also approaching its bloody conclusion. But every island invaded is coming at increasingly higher cost.
At every stage, the ferocity and intensity of the Japanese defense increases. What they thought were suicidal defense tactics in Saipan are redoubled at Iwo Jima.
February 19th, 1945, 60,000 U.S. Marines stormed the island of Iwo Jima, where a battle of unrivaled brutality begins.
The fighting on Iwo Jima stands as arguably the fiercest fighting that U.S. military personnel have ever experienced. There was no amount of punishment could be inflicted on the Japanese that would cause them to lose their will.
Essentially, they've decided that they are going to die there. When you have that kind of suicidal fervor, it means the sort of tactics that you might have used previously don't work. And so we start using flamethrowers, napalm, tanks up close, a style of battle that raises the level of violence even past what we've seen in earlier parts of World War II, which is hard to imagine.
When Iwo Jima falls, Japan suffers 20,000 casualties, compared to 23,000 American, the first time U.S. casualties exceed that of their enemy. As Allied forces prepare to invade Okinawa, the proposed launch pad for the invasion of Japan, the stakes for both sides are vast.
The Japanese defenders of Okinawa knew that they were not going to survive, they could not win, but they hoped that by causing enough casualties, creating enough horror, that it might either make the Americans decide not to invade Japan, or at least maybe get the Japanese a better peace offer of some kind.
April 1st, 1945. The American Armada approaches its target. Its scale is unmatched in the Pacific War.
Okinawa was a military undertaking on a scale that rivaled D Day. The size of the invasion force, the size of the invasion fleet.
1,200 warships support 3 mass amphibious attack forces hitting the beaches. More than 170,000 troops land eerily unopposed. But unseen by American troops are 97,000 Japanese defenders, ready to strike with unprecedented savagery.
They are taking the Japanese soldier and using just his body as a weapon.
Japanese soldiers with 22-pound satchel bombs run under tanks. 6,000 defenders banzai charge Marines armed only with bamboo spears and sidearms.
In our own time, we make the comparison with suicide bombers, but if you can imagine where entire Japanese units have that depth of commitment, that they would actually suffer mass, essentially suicidal death, rather than surrender their position, that's a very formidable military obstacle.
At sea, wave after wave of kamikazes crash into U.S. ships.
The kamikazes were especially terrifying to the Americans trying to shoot them down, because how do you deter somebody who's willing to die for something? Their goal was to die, and 18% of the kamikazes hit ships.
404 U.S. ships are struck. When Okinawa finally falls, nearly 100,000 Japanese soldiers and 150,000 civilians lie dead. The U.S. suffers 76,000 casualties, a third of the entire invasion force.
The escalation is horrifying here. And these are little islands. And now we're talking about invading the whole Japanese homeland, where there are millions of defenders and even more millions of civilians.
The U.S. War Department estimates that the invasion of Japan will result in 10 million Japanese casualties, along with at least 1.7 million American. Another solution must be sought. As the Allies celebrate victory in Europe, as Hitler and his Reich go up in flames, America swears in a new president. And Harry Truman is destined to unleash a weapon so fearsome, it will herald in a new dawn of warfare across the globe.